to power was one of my greatest accomplishments. Then one of my biggest disappointments is the unfulfilled potential of Lloyd Banks and Tony Yayo of G-Unit. Both Power's rise and G-Unit's fall are testaments to how growth is often the key element in any successful journey. I always felt that if I had done a better job teaching Banks and Yayo how to evolve and change their habits, they each would be in better places right now. Instead, they both stayed stuck in their mindset, and as a result, the success they desired has eluded them. In Banks' case, a lot of his failure to grow as an artist is connected to his emotional composition. Banks grew up in the same neighborhood as me, but was never a part of it in the same way. I actually hustled with his father. Banks was more content staying on his porch and watching the world from there. There's nothing wrong with that, but it underscored a particular aspect of his personality. Banks wanted things to come to him, as opposed to going out and getting them for himself. That's not me trying to assassinate his character. The guy has Lazy Lloyd tattooed on his arm. He literally wears his laziness on his sleeve. He's always projected an unhelpful mixture of being both introverted and cocky at the same time. The kind of person most comfortable being a big fish in a small pond. If Banks was hanging out in the studio with a bunch of unknown MCs, he'd be very confident. He'd enjoy being the center of attention. But if I suddenly showed up, he'd feel like he got demoted. He'd be bitter. He didn't feel like the center of attention anymore. I get it. I can take up a lot of the air in the room. The problem is that he'd never fight to get some of that oxygen back, which is exactly what a star is supposed to do. I believe a true star must possess 4 fundamental abilities: create great material, be a high-energy live performer, have a unique appearance, and possess a strong personality. Tupac had all 4. So does Mary J. Blige, Chris Brown too. Biggie didn't have all of them, but he was able to compensate in the areas where he was weaker. His appearance wasn't strong initially, so Bad Boy got him new sweaters and put sunglasses over his eye that kept moving all over the place. He couldn't move around the stage so much as a performer, so the head of his label became his dancer. It was a great distraction. The overhaul worked for Biggie. He came in the game with transcendent material, and then they picked up the slack in the areas he wasn't as strong in. He transformed himself into a star with a little management. If I'm being honest in evaluating Banks, he possesses maybe one of those qualities. He's a very good lyricist. Among what are known as the punchline rappers, rappers who will end their bars with a funny or tongue-in-cheek line, Banks like to call himself the PLK, or Punchline King. I don't know if he's the king, but I'll give it to him that he's in the conversation. He is not, however, a great live performer, stylish dresser, or a domineering personality. So if he doesn't check those 3 boxes, how is he going to get bigger and become the star in real life he is in his head? To me, one answer was to change how he interacted with the culture. That's why years ago, I told Banks to film a video of his life and post it on YouTube. Introduce people to his lifestyle. Let the camera follow him around for a while and see how he moves. Maybe something he says or does will create a spark, go viral, and then he'll have some heat around him again. What I didn't want him to do was sit there writing punchline after punchline and then grow resentful when no one seemed to care about his mixtapes anymore. They say insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. If that's so, Banks' temperament was definitely a little crazy. I'm not saying anything here that I haven't said to Banks directly. Another time I sat down with him, just when IG was starting to pop off, and tried to drop this gem on him. You gotta get on Instagram, I encouraged him. You can be a little awkward in person, so this is actually a better way for you to communicate with people. You just put pictures of what you think is cool on your page. That way you can control the conversation without having to feel uncomfortable. It's perfect for you. Nah, I don't want to do it, he said. Why not? You just put up the pictures, then write some witty shit around it. You can literally put punchlines under your pictures. You can utilize what you're good at to make some new fans. Nah, that's corny, he told me. Before adding, Biggie and Pac didn't do that shit. They're dead, my man, I told him. They died before this stuff was even invented. And how do you know they wouldn't be posting on IG if they were alive? But Banks was adamant. Biggie and Pac didn't do social media, so he wasn't going to do it either. It was a line of thinking that really blew my mind. It suggested that if Tupac was alive, he'd still be wearing leather vests and red bandanas tied around his head, sending girls his beeper number. Or that Biggie would still be wearing Gucci sweaters and playing Mortal Kombat 2 every night. It's ridiculous. Those guys would have evolved with their music, style, and personality too. Biggie was hysterical. His IG would have probably been one of the most popular pages in the entire world. I believe Pac would eventually return to his revolutionary roots. He would have had an impact on society way beyond music. Hell, even I had evolved in my attitude towards Instagram. When it first came out, I also thought it was corny. In 2014, I told the UK Guardian, I think it's messing up everything. It's giving us all really weird habits, taking pictures of things you don't even like. I felt that way at the time, but I didn't close off my mind to it. Over time, I started to realize that I just didn't know the platform well enough. I didn't intuit the rhythm of how to post or understand what kind of content resonated. Most important, I didn't appreciate how effective it was in directly reaching people. So I jumped all the way in and embraced it fully. Today, it's one of the most important public-facing tools at my disposal. Banks was resistant to that sort of evolution. His mind was stuck in the mid-90s, and he was in no hurry to release it from that trap. To be fair to Banks, it's actually a natural instinct. Scientists are starting to learn that the music we listen to as teenagers has a greater impact on us than music we might hear at any other point in our lives. Our brains are developing at their fastest pace between 12 and 22, and it seems that whatever we listen to at that period tends to get embedded in our minds forever. Banks was around 14 years old when Biggie and Pac were both popping, so that makes sense that they still resonate with him so deeply. I can relate. I still love the music from when I was that age too. The difference is I haven't patterned my career after KRS-One and Cool G Rap. What would be the point of that? They were both incredible in their moment, but I've always been concerned about creating my own moment rather than copying theirs. When Banks made that comment to me, I realized he had gone as far as he can go. In fact, my exact thought was, this is someone I can't invest another minute or dollar in. Everyone knows someone like Banks, the person who only respects a certain era and thinks everything else is trash. It could be music, but it could also be TV, film, sports, or fashion. At first, it seems kind of cool that they're so passionate about protecting a legacy. But after a while, it gets tired. Most people don't want to keep being lectured about why whatever they're enjoying in the present isn't as good as what came before it. It's great to respect the past, but never to the point that it stops you from moving into the future or even making the most out of the present. People are stuck in the past age prematurely. Their driver's license might say they're 30, but their mentality is older than a lot of folks in their 50s and 60s. Age isn't about what year you were born. It's about how you approach the year you're in right now. If you're open to new experiences, willing to take chances, and curious about new topics, you're young, period. On the other hand, if you're set in your ways and aren't interested in trying new things, or think you've already learned all there is to know, then you're old. In fact, you're dying. My beard has a couple of gray hairs in there, but I'm young. I feel and look fresh. Not because I still got a six-pack or wear cool sneakers, but because my spirit is youthful. I'm excited about what's going to happen this year as I was in 2002 or 2012. Someone could put me on to a new rapper tomorrow, and I'd be as pumped up as I was the first time I heard Nas. Just like I could watch a new sitcom and laugh as hard as the first time I watched Sanford & Son. I'm never going to cut myself off from new experiences. I really did try to help Banks, but you can't help anyone who is stuck in either a time or mind frame. If you feel stuck yourself, then you have to have the courage to come out of whatever little cocoon you've wrapped yourself up in and experience all the excitement the world still has to offer. Tony Yayo's issues were a little different. Like Banks, Yayo was from my neighborhood, but unlike Banks, he didn't stay on his stoop. He was very much in the street and running into as much action as he could. Yayo was wild from the day I met him. In our world, it was a temperament that served him well. He was liable to do anything at any time, and people gave him a wide berth because of it. At the time, I aided Yayo in being so wild. As a crew, we needed that aggressive and unpredictable energy. Even after we first started experiencing success, we were still living that lifestyle. We didn't see any reason to change. That meant we were going to be very in taking what we felt was ours. If someone disrespected us or got in our way, our response was to get them out of our way, whatever it took. One of my skills is I absorb information and process it faster than most people. So even as we were running wild through America's stadiums, nightclubs, and hotels, I was beginning to pick up signals that we were going to have to change how we approach things. The most obvious sign was that there were police everywhere we went. Stadium concourses, hotel lobbies, out in front of clubs, the cops were always there. You would think there was no other crime happening in whatever city we were in, considering the way they followed us around. Some of the other signs were less observable. There was a lot of nervous energy around us. It's an easy thing to miss when everything's moving so fast. But if you look past people's acquiescence, the fear is evident. I could read it in radio jocks, studio engineers, TV hosts, club managers, booking agents, and program managers. They wanted to do business with us, but not if they thought a gunfight might break out at any second. Realizing this, I accepted that I had to change how I approached dealing with disagreements and confrontation. I was going to express my dissatisfaction differently. I would have to press for what I wanted using managers and agents. I was going to have to fight with lawyers. I was going to have to diversify my strategies if I wanted to capitalize on the opportunities that success was presenting to us. I also recognized that we had to change how we approached time commitments. In the streets, if you wanted to start selling crack at 1 p.m., then that's when you started. If you want to take a break at 5 p.m., you took it. Want to skip 2 days outright? That's on you. Just make sure you get it sold. It's a lifestyle that conditions you to do what you want, when you want, so long as you get the product moved. It's not a lifestyle, however, that's conducive to interacting with corporations. If a radio station expects you at 8 a.m., you shouldn't wander in at 1 p.m. and still expect them to play your song. Just like if a record label booked you to record in the studio for 2 weeks, you shouldn't wait till the 10th day to finally show up and start recording. Transitioning from a street lifestyle to a more public persona was going to require a new mindset. Yayo didn't seem to register that. If I got into a disagreement with another artist, Yayo's reaction was, let's just bang him, because that would have been his response back in the neighborhood. If we got $100,000 for a series of club appearances, Yayo wasn't thinking about putting it in the bank. His first thought would be, hey, this could get us 3.5 kilos of cocaine. Let's flip those and we'll be sitting on some real money. Time and time again, I'd have to tell him, Yayo, we can't do that. Nothing else is going to work if we're just running around doing that dumb shit. We're going to be out of here just as fast as we got in here. In Yayo's mind, I was being too uptight. We had always done what we wanted, how we wanted, when we wanted. That's the attitude that had made us hot. Why did that have to change? In retrospect, a large part of the problem was the success initially came very easily to Yayo. He was locked up when Get Rich or Die Trying first broke. As soon as he got out of jail, I put him on stage. There was no transition period. He didn't have to spend time as an unknown MC, slowly getting his feet wet, learning how to interact with industry folks and getting the feel of what it was like to be around corporate people. Instead, I dropped him directly into the national spotlight and put a lot of money in his hand at the same time. I should have realized that it was not the ideal circumstance in which to suddenly ask him to change habits that had been developed over a lifetime. If anything, I should have known those habits would establish an even tighter grip on him. I learned that when things are moving very fast and you're constantly being put in new situations and environments, most people tend to lean back into their old habits, not develop new ones. After years of begging, cajoling, and threatening them to start doing things differently, I had to accept that Yayo and Banks were not capable of doing much more than what they were used to. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Those guys had been standing by the well for years and were still going to die of thirst. It was extremely disappointing, but I had to accept that many of their dominant character traits, recklessness, resentment, and a lack of discipline, were always going to impede their progress. It was just who they were. It might not sound like it, but I worked very hard to ensure their success. As I said, I would have loved for Yayo to become the next 50 Cent. If Yayo had been able to capitalize on his opportunities, it would have opened so many doors and empowered me to move even faster. I could have transitioned to focusing on other opportunities earlier. Instead, I ended up having to be 50 Cent a lot longer than I ever intended. It wasn't just Yayo who I wanted to elevate. The idea was for everyone associated with G Unit to eventually become bosses in their own right. All they had to do was follow my example. I had set them up to succeed by putting them on my records and letting them share the stage with me on tour. Once they were established, all they had to do was replicate the same formula, with new acts that they had selected, repeating the process all the way down. They never did it. Either they didn't want to, or they just didn't know how to identify new artists that they could then own a piece of. My intentions were for G Unit to be the first branches in a family tree that started with me and would go on to launch generations of rappers. Instead, I created a family tree that went on to live for one generation before dying. It shriveled up. I birthed my sons, but they didn't bear me any children. It all stopped with them. The writing